Okay, so a commenter a couple days ago asked me to do an update on Belarus, which I haven't talked about in a very long time. And I told them I would do it yesterday, and I didn't because I talked about Trump's legal battles again, because there was some news about that I wanted to talk about. But today, darn it, I'm going to talk about Belarus. Now, the reason why I haven't really done much in Belarus is not only because I haven't been paying so much to international news because of the election. Yes, that's true. But also, the thing is with Belarus, not a whole lot has happened. It's kind of like when I was talking about the Yellow-Vests. When the Yellow-Vests first started, it was exciting for a while, and I was talking about it when obviously no one else in the United States in media was talking about it. Obviously, people on YouTube like me were talking about the Yellow-Vests. But other than that, other than trying to get it trending on Twitter, which I'm surprised Twitter allowed, if you try to do that these days, I'm sure the Yellow Vests would never be allowed to trend on Twitter. But they kept it up. Weekend after weekend, people would come to Paris and riot and loot and destroy things. But, I was sympathetic to their cause, even though I thought that destroying the property of innocent people is not a good way of expressing yourself. The French are not exactly... they're not exactly the most civilized people, if you ask me, just, historically speaking. They don't, peaceful protest in France doesn't really go hand in hand. But the reason why I cite the Yellow Vests is because that went on for a very long time. And they were demanding that Macron step down. And at first I thought, wow, this is big news. And if this were happening in any other country, the U.S. media would be all over it, going like, wow, this guy's got to step down, and the international pressure would be mounting. And this guy would be told, oh my gosh, he has to leave, he has to leave. And Macron just said, no, I'm not leaving. I don't care what you people say. I won. I'm president for 5 years. And deal with it. And you know what? The protests continued. Eventually, it kind of faded a bit. I mean, I don't think that there's no protests going on now, but they're not as big as they were. And so I stopped talking about it. And in Belarus, after their election, which was probably a sham. Do I think that Lukashenko probably would have won anyway? Yes. Do I think that he rigged it to a certain extent? Almost certainly, because that's what happens in these countries. I mean, hell, I'm talking about election rigging here in the United States. If I think it's possible here, sure as hell it's possible in Belarus. Do I have proof of it in Belarus? No, but just instinctually. Is there election fraud in Belarus? Yeah, I'd say so. And so people were protesting that and saying that we want the other person who ran, which I have to give him some credit. This person who they wanted to be the president of Belarus at least ran for president of Belarus, unlike Juan Guaido, who never ran to be the president of Venezuela. And they had their protests in Minsk, and that went on going for a while. And it looked like Lukashenko, oh my gosh, could he be on death's door, politically speaking? There were rumors about splits between him and Putin. Him and Putin were not getting along very well because Belarus, despite having this reputation of essentially being a Russian puppet state, Lukashenko actually kind of tried to play both sides of the Russia versus NATO conflict. He tried to be buddy-buddy with NATO sometimes and also buddy-buddy with Putin. He wasn't trying to be nice to everybody, but he really was trying to make everyone think that he was on their side. Not that he was everybody's friend. It's a bit of a different thing. He was kind of playing a double agent, but out in the open. And so people were sort of playing that up around the time of these protests and saying that, well, Putin might not ride in to rescue Lukashenko. And so this could be the end for him because the West is abandoning him. Putin is not the friend that he might have been in the past. And then guess what? Nothing happened so far. Lukashenko's still in power. Yes, the protests have continued. They're still ongoing. I don't know if it's every day or at least every week, but I mean, it's pretty consistent. If you look for, news stories on this, you can find headlines every couple of days. There's something about protests in Belarus because they're still ongoing. And no, the West has not given up. They are continuing their sort of diplomatic pressure, recalling ambassadors, these sorts of things. Bulgaria, Slovakia, the United Kingdom, I'm sure many others have already, but those are the most recent ones, I believe, recalling their ambassadors from Belarus. Western leaders calling on Lukashenko to step down. And it looks to me like to the extent that there was any real divisions between Lukashenko and Putin before, and I don't know if there were, I don't have firsthand knowledge of their relationship. This pressure from the West has pushed him much more in Putin's corner, as you might expect. And Putin seems to be standing by Lukashenko. He seems to be intent on keeping Lukashenko in power, because a lot of people were thinking that, it doesn't. Lukashenko in particular is not that important to Putin, because Belarus as a country is close to Russia, and so even if Lukashenko's gone, the person whoever replaces Lukashenko is going to be someone who is going to be just as useful to Vladimir Putin. So Putin had no incentive to keep Lukashenko in. That was one narrative that some analysts were crafting when the initial protests were going on. That was sort of a bearish case for Lukashenko. But now we're seeing, not only do we have the Russian spy chief, so-called, I can't remember which agency in particular he was from, one of those, SVR, GRU, FSB type organizations within Russia. The leader of that flew to Belarus as a show of support. Putin and Lukashenko regularly speaking publicly about deepening ties between Russia and Belarus. And so it looks like these protests are going to go over about as well as the recurring protests that you get against Putin. In Russia, every few years or so, there's some big protest movement against Putin. It flares up for a little while and then it goes away, and Putin just basically ignores them. And I think that seems to be what they're trying to do in Belarus. Now, will this go away? I don't know. But I mean, because they seemed really, for a while, seemed to be pretty real and effective. Kind of like the Yellow Vests. It seemed like, wow, there's real distaste for the man here. It's not just all people who are being paid by the CIA. This doesn't seem like it, it's a majority sock puppet protesters. It seems like there's some real angst here. And these people really want him gone. But if he doesn't give in, what recourse do they have? Are they going to start a revolution? Do they have guns? No, of course they don't. This is a former Soviet country. There's not much they can do. There are certain things they could do. If they really wanted to shut the country down, which the West has tried to organize in certain countries. So like in Chile in 1971 or 72, whenever it was, the truckers' union protested against Salvador Allende, organized, I believe, in part by the CIA, because this is sort of a CIA tactic, shut down the truckers so that commerce in the country comes to a standstill. You shut down the economy, and that's supposed to force the leader to resign. We've been seeing some striking in Belarus, but I'm not seeing it yet. The momentum shifting their direction and the exit of Lukashenko becoming imminent. I don't see that happening. And so as of now, I don't think much has changed, other than perhaps he's more solidly now in Putin's corner, and that Putin seems to be reaffirming their connection. So I think Lukashenko will be around for the foreseeable future. I don't know what will happen if Putin ends up stepping down, which is something I haven't even talked about because I'm not sure that it's true. But there is that report from Fox News that Putin has Parkinson's and will be retiring soon because he can't continue his duties. I don't know if that's true. Could be true. But I kind of want to wait until I have something more concrete than just anonymous sources from Fox News. But if that ends up happening, that's something that might change my calculus on Belarus, because if somebody replaces Putin and Putin is no longer taking center stage, they might have a different approach to Lukashenko than Putin did. They might be someone who's a little more less focused on the individual Lukashenko and more just on the country of Belarus as a whole. And so that might destabilize his position a little bit. But for the foreseeable future, I think that Lukashenko is going to stick around. He is the last remaining leader of one of the post-Soviet republics who was the leader, I believe, before the end of the Soviet Union. You can sort of count Viktor Orban in Hungary, but Orban was not the leader of the country. He was part of the ruling class, certainly, but so were lots of these ex-communist leaders. Milosevic, of course, was a big communist and continued to lead his country for a long time. Turkmenbashi, I'm sure. Is he still alive? He might be. I don't know. Those Asian steppe countries, it's hard for me to remember them all. He might be been around just as long as Lukashenko, but Anyway, that's about all I have to say on this topic. If you get anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe. And I'd hate to have you miss when my brain is messing up. I don't quite remember. So I'm just going to end it there. Gosh, that was weird. Hope I didn't have a stroke.